What's happening, YouTube? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to throw a vinyl graphics package onto your truck, SUV, car, boat, airplane, whatever it might be. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. And today's graphics package is brought to us by Brothers Graphics. Go check them out, hit up their website. Now, before we get into this, I just want to note that installing a vinyl package takes a while. With the magic of video editing, this video is not going to be that long, but in order to do that package there, it probably took me about an hour and a half, and that's just for one side of the car. So make sure that you take your time and you go slow, because the quality is all in the details and the time that you put into it. If you try and rush installation of a vinyl graphics package, it's going to come out bubbly and messy, or if you're doing a real straight line like this one, not very straight, and then it's not going to look good, and then you have to peel it up, buy a new one, and start again. So without further ado, let's jump into this and I'll show you how we do it. First thing you're going to need is some masking tape or a painter's tape. Either one will work. I prefer painter's tape just because it comes off easier. Second thing you're going to need is a bottle filled with water. You're going to want to use purified water. Make sure it's not tap water unless your tap water is super clean, and you're not going to have any sort of mineral deposits in your water that are then going to end up underneath your graphic. Next, some isopropyl rubbing alcohol, at least 70%. This is to prep our surface before we go and install the graphic. Then you're going to need some sort of fine tip knife. A box cutter with a fresh blade can work. Be really careful when we use that, and we'll get to that in just a second. Then finally, you're going to need some sort of squeegee. I have two types here. I have one with a felt tip, nice and smooth. That way it's not going to damage our graphic. There's a plastic edge here too that you can also use. And then I have a more flexible one, so you can see that kind of bends in case we really need to go soft on this. Now, a lot of graphics are going to come in a tube like this, which means they're going to be rolled up. So the first thing that I did was I actually took the graphic and laid it out, and I put some heavy weights on either side of it. And this way it's not going to be rolling up as you're trying to apply it to your car, causing you unnecessary headache. I let this sit for about a day, and then it flattened out, and that'll make putting it on the truck, car, SUV, whatever you use, a lot easier. Now, if you're familiar with painting, you know that the outcome is all in the prep. The same thing kind of applies to vinyl graphics. If you have a dirty car like this, you're going to want to clean it up with something very basic. You don't want to use a car wash that has any sort of waxes in it or any sort of additives. They're going to create a barrier between your graphic and the surface of the car itself. You want it to adhere nicely and smoothly. Now we're going to take our rag or cloth, whatever you're using, in my case a paper towel, dab it with a little bit of isopropyl rubbing alcohol, just enough to get it damp. We're going to come through and just very lightly rub down the area that this graphics package is going to be applied to, just to make sure that we've gotten all water up, any other sort of particles or contaminants or anything that could be here. Make it nice and clean. Now that everything's dried here, we're going to take our painter's tape or masking tape, and we're going to hang our graphic exactly where we want it. I also picked up measuring tape, because I think with this kind of stuff, you want to really make sure that you get it right the first time, because once it's on, the only way to fix it would be to peel it up and try again, and then sometimes the adhesive isn't going to work as well. So I'm going to be using my measuring tape and the bottom of the car as a reference point of how high up we want the bottom to be. And then that's the beauty of the painter's tape. We can just kind of adjust this as needed if my height's off, and then we'll triple check when we get to the very end of this, and then we'll start peeling back the vinyl, and then we'll apply it. Alrighty, now that we've got this taped up, the next thing you're going to want to do is find the center of your graphic and apply a bunch of painter's tape to that, or masking tape, in order to hold it down. Because when we go to apply this, we're going to apply half of it first and then the other half. So find your midpoint. You can eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we are going to put a bunch of tape on that so this thing doesn't go anywhere. All right, so this is where the fun begins. Now, I've also opted to grab a pair of scissors. It's just gonna make this a little easier. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna slowly peel this back all the way to our midpoint. And then I'm gonna cut that white backing paper off. And then we're going to apply our soapy low soap content water solution here. Spray it onto the back of the vinyl, and then we will start to slowly apply and adjust and measure as needed to make sure that we are applying this in a nice straight line. A lot of vinyl stickers, you just got to go slow with it. You don't want it getting stuck to the backing paper. This one's looking pretty good. Oh, my bottom stripe there. So if this does happen, just take your fingernail and really, really gently pull that up and stick it back on the transfer paper there. Pull that. See, I'm pulling at a 180-degree angle. A little stuff like that. Sometimes it will get stuck in there. If you see that happening as you're doing it, take your finger, or again, get in there with your thumb. So you can see as I'm going here, some of these are not transferring or they're pulling up. If that happens, you just take your thumb and just kind of rub it back down. So you can see I'm just going to lightly mist it. We're not soaking this. It's just enough to give us some wiggle room should we need it. Okay, now this is not fully placed yet. I'm going to check my measurements to make sure that we're still level here and that I'm correct where this should go. I'm going to use the felt side to start. I feel like it's a little less aggressive. I'm just going to push from the center up and from the center down. And then again, if you're coming to the edge of the graphic, you can push out horizontally to start. We'll come back and do that all later. With little pieces like this, it can be a little difficult. Just gotta be really, really patient with it. Don't worry about the door seams yet. We're going to come back and get those later. All right, now that we've gone through and done our vertical pass, we're going to come through horizontally and push it out. Now the bubbling that you're seeing is just that top transfer piece. So that can be a little deceiving. You really just want to look at your graphic underneath. And then even if it's not perfect when you first do it, once we peel this off, all this in about 20 minutes, you can still come back and work it. A good quality vinyl like this will have some adjustability to it. You can sometimes even use a heat gun to do it if you have to. A poor quality vinyl is going to be very difficult to adjust. So just keep that in mind as you're shopping for something like this, and hopefully you choose Brothers Graphics. All right, now that that is all squeegeed out, it's now time to move our tape that you can see right there, that midpoint, to the side that we actually just did. So we're gonna add a whole bunch of painter's tape here, and then we're just gonna pull back and then repeat the process like we did on the front. Grab your spritzer, grab your tape measure, just to make sure we're doing this correctly. And then just like we did on the front, we're gonna slowly peel this back and start applying. I had some issues on the front, as you saw, with those little tiny letters, because the centers of the letters were kind of getting pulled up by the transfer paper. But if you're doing a graphic like this end of it, where it's just kind of straight lines and stuff, it should be a lot easier. And we'll spray our surface. Again, just a light mist here. Gives you the ability to just kind of adjust as needed. And then, very, very carefully, because now we are playing for keeps. We're gonna make sure this is nice and level. And now we already know that we measured the middle, so that should be correct. So I'm gonna come over here to the end, just make sure that's exactly where I want it. You can really give it a pull if needed, because like we said, it's already adhered on the other side. Move this over. So you can really yank on this and get it nice and straight. Check my measurements. Let's make sure it's correct. And then kind of pull and adjust here. And you also can use this as an opportunity to make sure that you don't have waves in your vinyl itself that you're then trying to work out later. It's no fun. Give that a nice pull. Pull from the top, pull from the bottom. Okay, and now we're gonna just repeat our squeegee process like we did. We're gonna first come up and down in a vertical orientation, making sure we get everything out. And then we'll come back horizontally. And the last thing we'll do is we'll cut out these door seams here, and then we'll be about done. You just gotta let this thing dry, usually for about 15 to 20 minutes before taking off the transfer paper. So I've now gone through and I've squeegeed that entire thing. As you can see, this looks nice and flush to our vehicle here. What we're gonna do now is come back with our X-Acto knife or our box cutter, something with a really fine tip, and we're gonna be really careful not to cut the paint as we're doing this, and we're gonna make little adjustments and do some trimming on the edges and then also on our door hinges here. So now with a fresh blade on my box cutter, I'm gonna come through here by hand and applying the lightest bit of pressure possible, cut through that. Test it to see if that cut. Yes, it did. So it really doesn't take much usually on a vinyl graphic. While these are good quality, you don't have to like saw into it in order to actually cut it. Just keep an eye on your handiwork here. Go very, very slowly, making sure that your knife doesn't wander and that your cut is where you want it. You can go all the way to the end of a door jamb and just use that. Some people like to leave a little gap. It's an aesthetic choice. Me, I'm just going right up to the fender here. I'm gonna pull that off, and then if you do that, you can actually kind of wrap it under. So even if your cut's not super straight, that's okay, because it should still work. All right, now I'm gonna come to my door jamb here. I'm going right along the edge of it. It's gonna be kind of hard to see with that big graphic there. So I'm gonna cut it right down the middle first, where I know the door gap is. And then I can always come back and trim off more once I'm done. Or, like I said, you can just wrap it under there, and if you think that looks good, you just go with that. So we've now given this some time to dry, and now it's time to actually pull it off. Like I said, you want to give it about 15 to 20 minutes for that graphic to really adhere to there. Then we'll start pulling that off in about a 180-degree angle from the way that it's mounted. AKA, pull it back straight as close to the car as you can. That way you don't pull up the graphic with it when you take off that transfer paper. And if it does come up at all while you're doing this, it's okay, just push it back down. We're gonna go back over this with the squeegee again and go really, really slowly, as I said, and pull it straight back into the graphic itself. Nice and slow. Voila. Usually a good quality vinyl is actually gonna have some breathability to it. And so that way, if you do have air bubbles in it, eventually, over the course of a couple days to a week, those air bubbles will just kind of dissipate outwards. And then it won't be as bad. And then eventually, it'll lay flat. So yeah, take the felt side of your squeegee, come back through, and touch up any areas that might need it.